Hello everybody out there and welcome to this, another edition of a late night screen review. This week we're talking about Immaculate. It's a boy!
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hello?
So Immaculate is directed by Michael Mohan and written by Andrew LaBelle, and it stars Sydney Sweeney, in a standout role, and is out in the UK on the 22nd, I think, of this month. So watch this space. What's the film about? So Immaculate tells a story of Cecilia, who's a young kind of budding nun. I don't know what the term is just before you become a nun. She's a student nun. And she moves to a brand new, parish in Italy. And it's this beautiful old, huge manor building with grounds and all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of a home for where nuns look after, people with severe illnesses, disabilities, dementia, things like that. And it's run in a kind of religious kind of nun monastery kind of way. So she's new, and what happens is obviously she's virginal. She wants to give herself to the Lord and serve God, and she's all she's innocent, and she's got all these kind of ambitions and things like that. A new up and comer in the nun world, and unfortunately something happens to her. She falls pregnant. It's an immaculate conception, which can only mean one thing. It's the second coming. That's right, folks. Jesus is coming back, and it's only going to be a good thing. Or is it?
Satan is Lord, Satan is Lord, Satan is Lord, Satan is Lord, Satan is Lord. So what did I think of the movie?
Ow. So here's the story, guys. I went to the cinema, obviously my local Cineplex in Loughborough, at Cineworld, and I was not looking forward to this movie. I'll be straight up and honest. I was kind of in a bad mood. I was tired. I'd not had enough to eat and all this kind of stuff. And I was a little bit late for the cinema screening. I left my phone in my car. I got halfway to the cinema and I had to run back and all this stuff. So needless to say, by the time I got sat down in the theatre, I was not in a happy mood. And I wasn't really kind of feeling this movie. I'd seen the trailer, and I'm sure a lot of you out there sort of saw that trailer and learned, oh look, it's another kind of possession / cult / Satan impregnating a woman kind of movie. We've seen these a million times before. It's a religious set film. We've seen a million of them, and so who cares, right? Who cares? And that's kind of how I was going into this movie. Now, I'm going to kind of try and keep this review sort of short and succinct, because I don't want to talk too much about it for a various couple of reasons that I'll get into momentarily. But I was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed this movie. Now, here's the thing. Here's the setup. I'm going to give a kind of rough setup framework to what the plot of how this film is structured, and then that's kind of going to be it. So there's no spoilers. I'm not going to spoil anything of this film, because I actually genuinely believe that if you're watching this review, if you're vaguely interested, then you should be seeing this film anyway. So go out and just go see the movie. Regardless. It's an interesting one, though. It's an interesting one. It's not as straightforward as all that, because I really enjoyed it, but there's kind of some caveats. Now, for me, the film starts out, it opens up, I'm going to talk about the opening of the movie very briefly. It opens up with a woman that we see in this monastery trying to escape. She sneaks out in the middle of the night, she steals some keys, she gets a bag, and she's obviously making a run for it. She's a regular nun on the run, this girl, and she gets to the front gate, and she's ripped back in. Now, this sequence takes, 5 minutes. It's the opener. It's the opener just before the credits roll. And it's full of jump scares. It's full of really cheesy sound effects. Like the Foley is very stock. And as I was watching this opener, I was like, oh God, this is going to be terrible. Now, that was just the opener. And what happened to this girl is she actually gets buried alive, which is pretty horrific. And then it cuts to the title of the movie, and then we go into the story proper. And then that's when Cecilia comes along. She's a fresh-faced, doe-eyed, brand new nun, and she comes to this convent, and everything is not what it seems. the film changes its kind of pacing and its thematics and the direction of the kind of story probably about 3 times during the whole film. Now, what I will say is she becomes pregnant. We all know that. It's called Immaculate. What is the baby? Is it going to be Jesus Christ? Is it going to be the next Satan? You know, is it going to be some sort of demon baby? Is it a cult? What's actually happening behind the scenes? We know something's happening. We know that straight from the off. That's no spoiler at all. But the convent isn't what it seems. She falls pregnant immaculately. She's never had sex. And we then go through the rest of the film through Cecilia's eyes, trying to figure out what's going on and why what's happened has happened to her. And again, there are some jump scares. There are some kind of cliche stuff, like there's something in the corner of the room, it's dark, turn the light on, turn the light off, oh my god, what's going on here, there and everywhere. You might have seen all that before, but the film is shot in a very kind of bleak, very kind of naturalistic way. It looks very kind of real world setting, you know. There's not a lot of pizzazz, there's not a lot of stylization about the movie. It's very stripped down. But here's the plot of the film. Here's the kind of over framework of the movie. It starts off with Cecilia coming to this convent, getting pregnant, and we think, oh, okay, it's either going to be a cult of some kind or they are Satan worshippers, and she thinks she's going to birth the next Jesus Christ, but she's actually going to birth the next Satan. No. That's not what's happening in this movie. I'm not going to tell you what's happening in this movie, but that isn't what is happening. But the film lets you think that. So it's almost like, I feel like the filmmaker started this movie out trying to troll us, making us believe that we're just sitting down and watching just an everyday carbon copy modern day horror film with all the tropes, and then it slowly starts to go, actually, that's not what you're watching. You're actually going to be watching something that's a bit more interesting with a bit more meat on the bones. And so as the film goes along, I started to like the film more and more and more. I started off like not interested, but then as the film went along, I was like slowly being pulled in. Now, Sydney Sweeney, who's the main actress, it's an absolute tour de force as far as I'm concerned. In my opinion, she is the best thing about this movie. She holds this movie together, and she does a great job taking us through on this journey with this character from an innocent nun, fresh under the, blue under the gills or whatever the term is, and then by the end, I can't tell you what happens in the end, but it's a huge character arc that she goes on from innocence to then discovering what's going on, being shocked and appalled and scared, then becoming a captor and becoming a victim, and then turning the tables. So what I am going to say about this movie is the last third of the film, it's almost another kind of stereotype that you see in a lot of horror movies, where the main victim then turns the tables on the hunters or the bad guys and hunts them down. So the hunted becomes the hunter. And that's what this film does, but it does it in a very different way. I don't want to say too much more. All I'll say is Sydney Sweeney is amazing in it. The gore is brutal, and the last sequence will leave you with an open mouth. It certainly did me. When I walked away from the cinema, at the last 5 minutes of this movie, I was literally like that. I cannot believe what I just saw. And if you think that horror movies are there to be a visceral experience, to really get under your skin, the last 5 minutes of that film will leave you with emotions. And you will leave feeling like, what the hell did I just see? And to me, that's a real good sign of a great horror movie. I mean, maybe not the best horror movie in the world. As I say, there are some tropes, there are some nitpicks about this movie that I didn't like. But for the most part, it was a really well-made movie. It kind of changed what I thought the movie was going to be. At least twice during the movie, there were a couple of little where the film just turns and becomes something else. So it keeps you on your toes. The main performance of Sydney Sweeney is brilliant as far as I'm concerned. And again, the last 5 minutes of this movie will probably leave you shocked and open mouthed like it did me. And for that, in my personal humble opinion, as a horror hound, it's kind of worth the price of admission just for that last 5 minutes of that movie. I was thoroughly entertained. As I say, the gore hits hard when it hits, but it doesn't overdo it. It does that kind of semi-cliche of the hunted becoming the hunter in the last third of the movie, but it does it in a different way, and it does it really well. And it isn't just done for the shock and for the gore and for like the fist pumping, yeah. It's not that kind of movie. It takes that kind of structure of a horror film, but brings it down and brings it more to like a realistic kind of real world interpretation. And I think that's just really interesting personally. So it's a high recommend from me. I really enjoyed this movie. I'd love to hear what other people thought. And as always, folks, stay safe, stay scared, and we'll see you soon. Bye.